Gundam Battle Assault for the PlayStation 1. Where do I begin with this one? Well, it's the very first Gundam game I ever owned as a kid, and I played the shit out of it. This was during a time when I was becoming a die-hard Gundam fan, and I was excited to try out this game when I first bought it. Before I go any further about the game, I might as well talk about its history. Gundam Battle Assault originally started out as part of the Gundam the Battlemaster series, which was developed by Bandai and Natsume, who were responsible for Gundam Wing Endless Duel. While I never seen much of the first Battlemaster game, I did see much of the second game, which was basically the Japanese version of Battle Assault. Both versions of the game are basically identical, with only two major differences that separate them, particularly in the Japanese version. The Japanese version has a completely original plot with original characters that look like Street Fighter rejects. It also had an exclusive mobile suit, which was the Hama Hama. When the game was restructured for the US release, Bandai wanted to capitalize on the success of Gundam Wing, and thus Hama Hama was taken out in favor of the Wing Gundam, which basically plays as a Zeta Gundam clone, and the made-up characters were replaced with actual Gundam characters. The Japanese version of the game also had a really awesome intro. But the American release removed it for whatever reason. Now I know this game has two sequels and the second game was considered superior in every way, but for now I'm going to focus on the first game. The story goes like this. It's the year after Colony 19X. The Federation and Zeon has signed a treaty to end the war, but certain people still run amok with mobile weapons, and now it's up to Hero to stop them, and blah blah blah. The story sucks dick. One funny thing to note here is that the character names are kinda goofy, since translating games was still a new concept back then. In this game, Camille is known as Kamiru, and Peru 2 is known as Pletu, or whatever you like to pronounce it. These might just be their original Japanese names, but still, it's interesting. When you start off the game, you only have a choice of 12 mobile suits. To unlock more to play in the Versus mode, you have to play the story mode on various difficulties. Though some characters randomly show up in the story, which can be a pain in the ass if you want to get mobile suits like New Gundam. The mobile suits all play differently from each other, with the exception of Wing Gundam and Zeta Gundam. As you may notice, both of the mobile suits you can play as are from the Universal Century. That's because the Battlemaster series was mostly focused on UC suits, and there was only one mobile suit in Battlemasters 2 that was from the alternate universe, that being the final boss of the game, Hydra Gundam, which was a mobile suit from the Gundam Wing side story, G-Unit, which is pretty random if you ask me. Clearly, this confused a lot of Gundam fans back in the day, especially since some of these mobile suits were from shows that were never brought over to America at the time, like Zeta and Double Zeta. As for the mobile suits themselves, most of them are okay. Some are fun to play as, like Double Zeta and Zaku 2, although some play like utter shit like Zeong and Akgai. When it comes to my favorite mobile suit in the game, I generally go for the O, as I feel that its attacks are incredibly broken and useful, especially when I want to play this game on hard mode. The story mode will always put you into 6 randomized fights with the other playable characters, as well as 4 bosses, Big Zom, New Zeal, Hydra, and Psycho Gundam MK3, which was an original creation made particularly for the Battle Assault series, and holy shit is he hard. Moving on to the gameplay, it's a bit different compared to most fighting games. Instead of a normal health bar, you have what is known as temperature bars. Every time you get hit, your bar goes down. If it goes down all the way, you get an overheat, which will temporarily knock you down. Get overheated 3 times, your mobile suit shuts down, and the opposing player wins the match. You also have a boost gauge, which allows you to temporarily fly or dash depending on the mobile suit, and then the special gauge, which allows you to do your hyper attacks up to a total of 3 times per fight. I'll go more into hyper moves later when I talk about the controls. The game itself is pretty much a slow-paced fighting game with Gundam mechs. While normally it's a bad thing for fighting games to be slow, I don't mind it much here because A, it makes sense since we're playing as giant robots, and B, the combat is built around the pacing. You can punch and kick just fine like in most fighting games, but one of the big problems with Battle Assault is that you can't really pull off long chains of combos like in most fighting games. Most of the time when you try to pull off combos, it's the most basic kinds of combos. And even when you mix it up with special moves, sometimes the special move just doesn't connect well and the AI will usually block it. You basically gotta get real good at this game if you ever want to pull off any nasty combos. Other than that, the controls are pretty much like your standard fighting game. Pressing back blocks most attacks, double tapping forward lets you dash or run, pressing the top buttons allows you to ascend or descend in the air, and if you perform a special button combination, you can fly in the air indefinitely for a short while. When you hit triangle and circle together, you can give up some health to either dodge enemy attacks or create a shield to defend from projectiles. To my knowledge, only 4 mobile suits in the whole game can do that: Queen Manta, Zio, Double Zeta, and Zeong. You can also get up close to an enemy and temporarily stun them, but I barely use it. I almost forgot to mention that you can jump by pressing up on the D-pad, and you can walk by pressing forward and backwards, but who wants to do that? You're better off just dashing. Most of the specials are simple to learn. Each character has their own long-range weapon to attack enemies from afar, but you can't constantly spam projectile weapons since they take up ammo, which is an idea that I like since it discourages projectile spamming. Each suit also has their own unblockable attack, which can be used when enemies constantly guard. Finally, each suit with the exception of 3 have their own hyper attack. Oh, the hyper attacks. This is one of the things that Natsume and Bandai fucked up on. In order to activate your hyper attack, you need to tap down, right, square perfectly. Now that's a pain in the ass. It's just way too long of a button combination. If you go too fast, then it doesn't work. If you try to use it by itself, then the AI will block it 90% of the time. And if it's a really awkward hyper move, like Wing and Zeta's Wave Rider Uppercut, then you will take one hell of a punishment. This is generally why I like the Oza most, because his hyper attack is this cool unblockable beam saber spamming attack. Overall, the gameplay is harmless. It hasn't aged well, but it's definitely satisfying for a Gundam fan. The graphics are okay for PS1 standards, but at times, it can look very pixelated, especially on an HD TV. The sprites are very fluently animated and looks really good. The mobile suits were actually made up of mini sprites, so they can have more robotic movement, which works well, but it's another reason why the game feels rather slow. One thing that I like is that if you attack a mobile suit's body part enough times, it will cause cosmetic damage. It's a nice feature. The background scenery is okay, but it can get very boring to look at. In general, Battle Assault 1's visuals aren't really that impressive, but it does get better later on in the second game. For a Gundam game, the music is simply outstanding. It's one of the best soundtracks that I've ever heard in a game. I love every single theme in the game, with my personal favorite themes being Zeta Gundam's theme and Okai's theme, though some themes do feel out of place, like Sazabi's theme, which is a disco sounding tune, and then there is GPO2A's theme, which sounds like something you hear from the countryside. Aside from that, the music is kick-ass. Makes me wish there was a soundtrack for it. Gundam Battle Assault doesn't really do anything truly special to stand out compared to other fighting games, but it is functional, and I enjoy playing through most of it, probably because I'm a Gundam fan, which is generally what this game is geared towards. Fans of the franchise may enjoy this one, but it's not a game that I would recommend for casual fighting game fans. When it comes down to it, the second game is definitely the superior game, and the game that I would recommend fighting game fans in general to try out, but I still like the first game. The gameplay was solid, the music was phenomenal, and while it did lack story elements and visuals, I thought its good aspects outweighed its bad. If you're a Gundam fan who owns a PlayStation, then give this one a try, but for everyone else, I would approach this game carefully. Final score, 7 out of 10.